Hi, thanks for joining today. My name is Jason Bomar with Net.Academy. This is session 9 on practical OSPF for network engineers. We're starting to get close to the end of the series here. We'll do one more demo and then we'll call it a wrap. As always, if you have questions or feedback, you can leave it in the comments or you can email me directly. And also, as always, if you like the content we're doing, please give us a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, and if you'd like to be notified when we publish new content, which is starting to increase in frequency, please click the bell notification icon. Pretty straightforward agenda today. We're going to talk about OSPF summarization, authentication, and troubleshooting. So when it comes to summarization, this probably won't be a big surprise if you've been following along in the series. We can either do this on the Autonomous System Boundary Router, or the ASBR, or the Area Border Router, the ABR. This makes sense, again, when we think about it. Those are the places where we generate Type 5 and Type 3 LSAs respectively. So it makes sense we would do our summarization there. So if I have these EIGRP routes and I want to summarize them, I come into the routing process and I just do a summary address command and then I put in my summarization. Now, as long as you're allowing other routes that don't fall into this through your redistribution or your filtering, then this would just summarize the routes that are included. And likewise, if I want to do this on the ABR, it's a little bit different, but pretty similar concept. I use something known as an area range command, and it always references the area that you're summarizing from. So in this case, we're summarizing from area 12 into area 0. So under the routing process, I just do an area 12 range, and then again, my summary address. And this not only makes your routing table smaller, it also makes your link state database smaller, because I'm generating fewer Type 5 and Type 3 LSAs, right? Authentication. So technically, there's two different ways you could do authentication, Type 1 or clear text, and Type 2 or MD5. In my opinion, if you're going to do authentication, or if your company requires authentication, it should be Type 5. I don't see the point to doing authentication and then having your string just be open clear text. You do need to be aware, though, of some of the operational challenges in doing this kind of authentication. So, for example, if your key doesn't match, or if you have to rotate keys on a regular basis, your adjacencies will be down until you get them to match. So you just need to think about that. It's a pretty simple configuration. You go into the interface to define the key, and you go into the routing process to turn on authentication in the area. Let's talk a little bit about troubleshooting in OSPF. The number one thing that I hear would be problems with adjacencies for me. And there could be a number of reasons for this. Your hello and dead intervals might not match. They do need to match. Now in Cisco, this is sometimes masked by using network types, but the network type is really just another way, when it comes to the adjacency not forming, of typically setting that hello and dead. So watch those hellos and deads. You could have that problem if the MTU doesn't match. Let's say I've got a tunnel interface, and on one side I've set the MTU low, and on the other side I didn't do that to match. You might find that OSPF will not form an adjacency. We did just talk about authentication if the key doesn't match for any reason, right? And then if your area ID or subnet mismatch, I do this all the time when I'm working kind of fast in a lab. One side I'll do like area 6.6.6.6, and on the other side of the link I'll do area 6. In my mind, I'm conflating those two because I kind of grew up in that era where I did a lot of dotted quad notation for my areas. But those are technically different areas. So I will say, oh, I don't understand why this adjacency isn't coming up. It's because I have an area mismatch. Or likewise, perhaps I typo on an IP address. Maybe I mean to put in .13 and I put in .12 instead or something like that. And then lastly, when you're troubleshooting these, there is a pretty handy command. We're going to look at it in some depth on the next session, and that's debug IP OSPF adjacency. You always need to be a little careful with debug commands. However, unless you have lots and lots of adjacencies, this is a fairly easy command to do. It also tends to diagnose your problem rather quickly, so you don't need to run it for a long time. You're not typically running this for minutes or even longer trying to capture lots of data. You're really just running it long enough to figure out why the adjacency is not coming up. I just ran into this one recently for a customer. I filtered a route, but it's still showing up. Mostly you're going to see this with intra-area filters, which don't really exist in OSPF or not in any meaningful way. And we just need to keep in mind that the whole concept of OSPF is to have this common link state database that will have all the same LSAs for within an area so that we can all build our map. Remember, we put ourselves at the root and then we look out along the branches, right? And when that can't happen, you would have a problem. So it always happens. Now you can filter it from the local router's IP routing table, but it's still in the link state database and it's still being propagated to the other routers in the area. So it's important to remember you can't really filter that way. If you're having a different filter problem, it might just be something along the lines of your prefix list or your route map. And last but definitely not least, this is common to almost every routing protocol out there. You, for some reason, will need to steer traffic manually. Maybe you have two WAN links and one of them you pay a usage fee on, like perhaps it's a satellite link, and the other one it's an all-you-can-eat buffet of bandwidth. And so you always want to use that all-you-can-eat path, right? So you have a couple of options here. Probably the easiest is you could just manually set the cost or change the bandwidth, right? Remember in OSPF, our cost is generated off our bandwidth. So you could do that. It's not my favorite method, but there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It's a completely fine way of going about it. What the two methods I probably prefer, if they're available to me, and sometimes they're not, is if it is dealing with external routes, I prefer to use the E1 versus E2 method that we talked about earlier, right? I will always prefer an E1 over an E2. So I like that method more. Or perhaps I can do something if I have an ABR in the path, like the longest match rule. Maybe I will summarize down one of the ABRs and not summarize down the other ABR or something along those lines. And I will always take that longest prefix, but I will always fail over to the other ABR if a prefix disappears. Again, it's going to come down a lot of times to your particular situation. And that wraps it up today here at Net.Academy. I want to thank you for sticking through this whole session. And like I said, we have one more coming up. It will be an OSPF demo. We'll go through a lot of the features we've gone over since the last demo that we did. This isn't a definitive or an exhaustive listing of OSPF features. It's not even close to that. However, I feel this is a really good foothold. If you have to just do day-to-day administration in an OSPF network, I really think this gets you 80-85% of the way there. So we don't cover those advanced topics like virtual links or sham links or conditional advertisements, all these different things that you might want to do. They're all important, but they tend to be a little more esoteric. You need to know those absolutely if you're going to cert up. But we've said since day one here at Net.Academy that this is not a cert channel. It's more of a practical approach to day-to-day administration of your network. Hopefully you got something out of this. As always, you can leave a comment or email me directly. And thank you for your time.
Need help? Call our cybersecurity team and book a consultation with us today.